Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. I'm your host today, Steve Francisco, and it's a real pleasure for me to interview for the first time the Sheriff of Dakota County, Dave Bellows. Dave, welcome to Access to Democracy.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for being here. I know my colleague Alan Miller has interviewed you previously, so we may cover some new ground today. Tell me a little bit. I understand that you have a career, 34 years in law enforcement, 19 years with the Lakeville Police Department, and 14 years with the Dakota County Sheriff's Office. You're now in your fourth year as Sheriff of Dakota County.
That's right. I started my career back in 1980 and with the Lakeville Police Department. I was with them for the 19 years, as you said. Worked as a patrol officer initially, became a detective, a sergeant, and I was a lieutenant when in 1999 I was asked by then Sheriff Don Goodmanson, who was actually my chief at one time at Lakeville, if I was interested in coming over to the Sheriff's Office. You know, I thought, time for a change. And so I came over to the Sheriff's Office, and I've been there for the last 14 years as a commander, the chief deputy for 10, and then I became sheriff in 2010.
Very good. We live in the third most populous county in the state of Minnesota. I still think Dakota is probably one of the faster growing counties in Minnesota. We have about 405,000 people living in our county now. We've seen a lot of changes in this county. In your career, looking back at 30 years, what would you say is the biggest single change that you've noticed in law enforcement, in how police officers and sheriffs do their job?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's been a number of changes. What we're dealing with now, I think, is the use of technology in crime. In years past, you know, we would handle the robberies and the burglaries, but with the new technology and the use of computers, that seems to be really one of the challenges that we in law enforcement are dealing with.
And one of the responsibilities of the sheriff, obviously, one that most people probably would recognize right away, is you're responsible for running the Dakota County Jail. On an average day, how many people are you housing in the Dakota County Jail, just on average?
On average, we're around 280. We've been as high as 305 a day. That was our high water mark in 2007 on a daily average for the entire year. And to put it in perspective, the jail has a capacity of 265. One of the things that we did, one of the business decisions, because I approach the operation of the jail as really a business proposition too. One of the things we did was we have the women, when they're brought in and booked, they're actually transported down to the Ramsey County Workhouse, because that lets us maximize the rest of the jail for the males. You can't, obviously, for obvious reasons, mix male-female inmates. And because our number of female inmates would typically take up about half a housing unit, by taking and housing them down at Ramsey County, we can maximize the housing.
So we have a contract with Ramsey County that they provide that service?
Right.
I see. And do you feel that you have adequate staff to help you with managing the jail population that you have?
Well, I think we have a great staff. It is tough because One of the things is that, well, let me go back up a little bit. I'm real fortunate because I've got a great senior management team, and that's where success lies. It doesn't lie with Dave Bellows, the sheriff. It lies with the folks that I have in senior positions and their ability to do their jobs. But one of the things that we deal with is our correctional staff. Many of them want to be police officers, and we keep losing them to other agencies, or we bring them onto our agency as licensed officers, which creates that turnover. But people that have worked in a jail really have some unique skills, and number one is their ability, their interpersonal skills in working with criminals, because they do it day in and day out.
I'm learning a little bit more about this in my own family because I have a nephew who's a corrections officer at Stillwater. He's just come back from a deployment with the National Guard, and hearing his stories about his experience too. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's turn to an issue that has certainly been in the news quite a bit lately. Americans, Minnesotans, were horrified last December by the terrible news out of Newtown, Connecticut. The school shooting tragedy left 20 children dead in an elementary school and 6 adults, I believe. And in this shooting, the person who allegedly perpetrated this crime, young man named Adam Lanza, the police investigation revealed that he used 3 different weapons, a Bushmaster XM15 E2S rifle with a 30-round magazine, a 9mm Sig Sauer P226 handgun, and a 10mm Glock handgun, and in less than 5 minutes, he fired off 155 shots. This comprised 154 shots from the rifle and 1 shot from the 10mm pistol that the shooter used to take his own life. After Newtown, you came out publicly for a ban, in support of a ban on high-capacity assault weapons. Tell us more about how you came to that conclusion and why.
Well, let me correct it. That was not accurate. I had a discussion with a reporter. What I said is that high-capacity weapons and assault weapons should be part of the discussion. I did not call for a ban at that time. And
so the Egan Patch got it wrong.
They got it wrong.
And
there, if you look, that's the only paper that's ever said that.
That reported that.
That reported it. I said it should be part of the discussion because clearly when these events happen, you have to look at the totality. What, how did they happen? In my view, one of the biggest concerns we have is who's getting access to these weapons. I've always had a great concern about that. I have approved we were responsible for approving, or the sheriffs are, all of the permit to carries. This year alone, we're closing in on about 2,500, just year to date, 2,500 new permit to carry applications. To put it in perspective, we did that for all of last year. We did that all of last year. And
there was a spike in the number of applications for the concealed carry permits following Newtown too, wasn't there?
yes.
Yeah, in Dakota County.
And we saw the same thing in 2008. There was a spike in 2008, and then, but last year we had about 2,500, which exceeded the year before by about 40%. This year we're almost equal to last year, and we're only into May. But
let me shift back to this issue about the high-capacity magazines, because in the shooting in Aurora, Colorado, and in Newtown, the argument of the proponents of the limitations, say limiting it to a magazine with no more than 10 bullets, if a shooter had to take the time to stop shooting and change, it might give the opportunity for somebody to overpower them and stop additional innocent deaths.
I mean, that is clearly an argument that's made.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about limitations on the magazines?
I think, again, when we talk about the weapons used and the capacity, clearly the capacity can have an impact on any of these shootings. But I always like to go back and look at the people that have had access to these weapons. And the point I was trying to make before is when I approve a permit application, I'm only able to get, there's 10 points that we look at, Steve. But one of them is the mental health history. But the only history I can get is any mental health that's been required by the courts, any commitments or treatment by the courts. An individual that has been treated for mental health issues but not under any of the court jurisdiction,
Right.
I'll never get that information.
Through a private practice,
Through
for
a
example,
private
you would never know about that. So that seems like it's a glaring hole in Minnesota's background check process.
I think it's a glaring hole.
And would you like to see the legislature address that? You know, this session, as you know,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't address the gun control issue at all. It was pulled by the Speaker of the House from the floor.
That's right.
So perhaps in the next session, is this something you believe they should take a look at?
Most definitely. I really do. When we talk about the whole issue of guns, you have folks that are on the Second Amendment and wanting to protect the Second Amendment. And I understand that. You have folks that want to protect the privacy issue and say, you know what, we shouldn't have to give up any of that personal information. But the issue being is if you want the permission, or if you want the privilege of a permit to carry, maybe you should have to give up some of that information so that we know that we're giving these permits to the right people, the people that have the psychological background to actually handle it.
And the polling that I've seen on this issue, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, shows that the vast majority of Americans, and Minnesotans included, support reasonable background checks
Yes.
as a way of finding out this information so that people who shouldn't be in possession of weapons that endanger all of us don't get those weapons.
That's exactly it. And I've already had, folks that are concerned about privacy issues. They've contacted me. This is a hot button issue, as you can imagine.
No doubt.
Everybody from all the sides are concerned about what's the impact, to me as a privacy rights person, as a Second Amendment person. And I'm not sure if we ever come to a solution, and I hope we do someday, I'm not sure we're going to make everybody happy. I don't think that's possible.
One of the arguments that some of the opponents of additional background checks and other matters have raised is they said, well, look, we have tons of books on the law, tons of laws on the book right now
Yes.
that limit who can get guns, and that those laws are ineffective in preventing the kind of tragedies that we saw in Newtown, but not just there, here at Red Lake in Minnesota, at Rocori High School in near the St. Cloud area, and other types of incidents that we've seen, the shooting at Accent Signage in Minneapolis last year. But it seems like a strange kind of logic that says, well, because you can't prevent every incident and because people are going to violate the law, we shouldn't have a law.
That's right.
It's like, that's sort of like saying, isn't it, that, well, you have laws against murder, but
Yes.
people are still going to commit murders.
That's exactly it. I always put it in the context of let's establish the laws that will help try to prevent these things from happening. Let's take away it being state sanctioned is how I refer to it. And again, there are no simple solutions. These are tragedies. My heart bled for those children in Connecticut. And in fact, I met a couple about 3 weeks later that were from just outside of Newtown, and you get firsthand account of the impact of that, and you don't forget about it.
And it had to be pretty traumatic, too, for the first responders, the police officers and medical personnel who responded to a scene like that, too. Just devastating.
Yeah, I've read articles on the number of first responders that to this day may not have returned to work because of the psychological effect of walking over the body of children.
Very tough. Let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about another issue, another challenge to law enforcement. A few years ago, I had the chance to meet the chief of police down in Red Wing, Minnesota, and at that time, this is about 4 or 5 years ago, he told me, he said, my town and Minnesota is in the midst of a crystal meth epidemic, and that the need of these people to get a hold of the crystal meth was largely responsible for most of the burglaries and a good number of robberies that were occurring all over the state. What is the situation with crystal meth here in Dakota County and maybe statewide, if you have information about that too? Where are we at?
Well, one of the things that the legislature did, and I'm thinking it's about 4 years, 3-4 years ago, was to take pseudoephedrins and put them behind the counter. So we had a sign for them when you'd want to get cold remedies, because that was a main ingredient in the manufacturing of methamphetamine.
Right.
Great public policy. It has the number of meth labs has just about fallen off the end of the table. We don't see that anymore. The Dakota County Drug Task Force, which serves all of Dakota County, I think the year before that had 28, and they went from 28 found meth labs down to 1, and I don't even think they've had one since then. So that piece of it was great
So that's
public
good
policy.
news.
That's
Yeah.
good news. The reality, or the other reality, is that about 85% of methamphetamine still was imported from the southern United States, Mexico, and so we still are dealing with it. And the Drug Task Force, it's still, as I understand it, methamphetamine is still the number one drug that they deal with in terms of occurrence and weight. Unfortunately, the second one is heroin's really making a resurgence.
Big jump.
Right.
Do we need to be concerned also about the presence of other types of synthetic drugs that are showing up in our community? I've been reading some about synthetic marijuana.
Correct.
And use of bath salts
That's right.
in the production of this product. Other types of issues like that?
We're running into that issue. It's not at the same rate that we're seeing with the methamphetamine or the heroin, but the synthetics have, we're seeing them on the radar screen. One of the problems that was or challenges that we had initially was how they could be evaluated, because the BCA, which does all of the evaluation for drugs, didn't have the capacity to do it at that time. Now they have. So we are dealing with the synthetics, and we're having to battle that. It's the heroin and the methamphetamine, and the heroin is a concern for me, because we're seeing kids that are starting out with prescription medication, and they get the prescription medication, they find it in the cabinets of their folks' home or friends' home, and they start taking the Percocets and the Vicodins, which is the same type of, essentially the same feeling that heroin gives. And when they run out of that medication, can no longer, they can't buy it on the street, it's too expensive, but heroin can be purchased much cheaper. And so we've seen a lot of heroin overdoses and deaths. And so I know you want to talk about the Take Back program, but that's why I'm so strongly in favor of the Take Back.
You have a very innovative program in the Sheriff's Office right now called the Prescription Drug Drop-Off Program. Tell us about what that is, how it works.
Well, it's a program that I think is being realized throughout the United States, but what I urge is for individuals to go into your cabinet, find those old medications that are expired, unused, and that you don't need any longer. Put them in a bag. You can take them to your local police department or the sheriff's office.
You have 5 locations in the county, is that correct?
It should be up to we should be up to 11 right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought I had seen Egan, Mendota Heights, West St. Paul, South St. Paul, Inver Grove Heights.
Lakeville has theirs. To make it easier, Hastings PD doesn't have it because we have it at the sheriff's office in Hastings. And I believe Inver Grove Heights is going to be rolling theirs out shortly. Everybody else should have theirs within Dakota County. You can take it to your PD, put
No
your medication.
questions
No
asked,
questions
anonymous.
asked. If you're concerned about your name on the prescription bottle, you can just dump them into a bag or put a black marker over it. We don't care. We just want to get them out of the cabinets, because here's the cautionary tale. Parents may be their child's biggest pusher and they don't know it.
Yeah, very interesting. Last question on the drugs.
Sure.
Lots of drug activity has historically been associated with gang activity. Do we have gangs in Dakota County?
We deal with the gang issue in Dakota County.
Is it related to the drug issue?
Sure
Or
it
is
is.
it general criminality?
It's related to the drugs, which is related to the money. Gangs, the drugs are what fuel the finance for the gangs. We don't have the issues like you'll see in the urban areas of Minneapolis, St. Paul, but we do deal with gangs. We'll find them in safe houses throughout Dakota County.
Well, the fact that the county has some major transportation crossroads too, because we have at least 2 interstates running through this county, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the only group that really respects borders are the police, because If we're here in Egan, we've got our borders to Egan
Yeah,
and
Dakota County has
Dakota
its
County.
border with Hennepin.
Criminals don't
Ramsey.
care if they're in Hennepin, Ramsey, or Dakota.
Right.
And to put it in perspective, over 50% of our jail population comes to us from outside of Dakota County in terms of that's where they live. They come into Dakota County, commit their crime, and because of the superb law enforcement here, we arrest them and they go to jail. But that just gives you a sense of over 50% come to us from outside of Dakota
Right.
County.
I want to ask you, too, about domestic violence. We've had some really horrific stories in the news here in Minnesota recently of incidents between a husband and a wife or a boyfriend and a girlfriend that resulted in women being killed. What is your office doing in a proactive sense to deal with issues of domestic violence, and how do you prioritize the enforcement of no-contact orders issued by courts? Or
Well, we have a deputy that's specifically assigned to working with women that have been victims of domestic violence. We handle the case, and she does the follow-up with them. She's making sure that social services are involved, that these women have safe locations. If necessary, we get them involved with the Lewis House, so they have a safe place.
a shelter?
A shelter run by 360 Communities, a great organization here in Dakota County. In addition, in one of the cases you just picked, the Apple Valley case, where the individual has been arrested for allegedly murdering his wife. We were involved in that case because it involved cell phones, and it was the work of our electronic crimes unit that helped get a first-degree murder indictment through the grand jury on this individual. It was great work by Apple Valley PD. I don't want to take it away from their detectives. They did great work. We assisted in the forensic piece of it. In working together, her husband has been charged with first-degree murder.
This is a good segue, because I did want to ask you about computer crime, or so-called electronic crime, use of cell phones, committing types of crimes that people didn't even imagine a few years ago. For example, illicitly photographing somebody in the nude, in a gym locker room or at school, using this type of photography and posting it on social media, on the internet. Plus, the more insidious type that we know about too, child pornography, the dissemination of child pornography over the internet. What does your office see in terms of those types of cases right here in Dakota County, and what are you doing about that?
Well, we started our computer crimes unit in 2003. We saw that this was starting to become a major issue as the technology and crime. I think I talked about it a little bit earlier. And so in 2003 we started it. Well, we've renamed it the Electronic Crimes Unit because it's not just computers anymore. It's cell phones. They outnumber the number of computers that we handle. And over 50% of the work that they do deals with exploited children and child pornography. And it's not just a Dakota County, because an individual that has child pornography is sharing it throughout the world.
Right.
You know, the World Wide Web has many positive pieces about it, but there is, as you said, insidious pieces of the World Wide Web, and it's used as a conveyance for criminal activity.
Dave, what can parents do to protect their children from being victimized by internet predators?
Well, one is they have to have discussions with their children. The second piece is when their kids are on the computer, don't be afraid to walk in and see who they're conversing with.
Say, what site are you visiting, or who are you talking to?
You're a parent, get to be a parent, be a parent. And you may find yourself that your child is conversing with someone that they think is their age. You know, a young girl or a young boy might be thinking they're talking to another young boy or girl of the same age. They're talking with a 35-year-old man who is pretending to be someone else, wanting to make a meet with them. We call it travelers. Part of our unit will sometimes be able to go out and we'll engage these individuals. We'll find them out on the internet and we'll engage them. They're thinking they're talking to a 15-year-old.
They're talking to the Dakota County Sheriff's Office.
They're talking to the Dakota County Sheriff's Office. It's a cautionary tale I want them to be aware of, because we had a case, we worked with Lakeville Police, and it was an individual who wanted to meet a young girl in one of their parks, and we set up a meet and time, and when he showed up, he got to meet the law enforcement community at large.
And you had the internet record of what the communications were that implicated the suspect.
Precisely.
And one more point we should make about this type of crime. It isn't just young girls either, right?
No.
Boys are vulnerable
Yes.
to the same type of crime,
Yeah,
too.
it's young kids.
Our time is starting to wind down, Dave, and I don't want to let this opportunity go without raising a couple of questions with you about some of the community outreach that
Sure.
you do as Dakota County Sheriff and that your office does with the community. And one of the things I saw on your website that looked very interesting, you have something called the Citizen Academy Program.
Yes.
Could you tell us more about what that is?
It's an 8-week program that brings in citizens from across Dakota County. And we give them hands-on opportunity to see exactly what we do at the Sheriff's Office, because a lot of people don't realize all of the responsibilities that a Sheriff's Office has. And so over the 8 weeks, they get to do some things with use of force. They get to get a sense of the jail operation. We take them through tour of the jail.
They learn a little bit about the law, maybe,
They learn a
about
little bit
criminal
about the
law,
law,
what you can
criminal
and
law.
can't do as a police officer?
We take them through a mock trial. We work with a judge and a member from the Mr. Backstrom's office, and we put on a DUI trial, so they get to see what that is firsthand. But my favorite part is the last class, or the graduation night, and I always get to ask them, what have you learned? And they are so excited about the things that they've got to learn. And I want to give credit to Captain Jim Rogers. He started the program. He's been our point person on it, and he does a wonderful job. And I want to invite you to next year's Citizens Academy.
And I'm going to take you up on that.
Thank you.
We talked about before
You
the
bet.
program. I'm definitely interested. Also coming up in August, Night to Unite.
Yes.
What is this?
Night to Unite is neighbors getting to know neighbors.
Tuesday, August 6th
Right.
in the evening.
That's right. And you'll have neighborhoods throughout Dakota County. You'll have a party, get people so they know each other, because the best crime of crime avoidance or prevention is neighbors looking out for neighbors.
Yeah.
When you see something suspicious, I say this time and time again, you see something suspicious, call 911.
Yeah.
Don't sit on it, because a lot of times we can intervene.
Last few seconds,
Sure.
very quickly, in 30 seconds or
Yes.
less, a young person watching this show today, considering a career in law enforcement, what advice would you have for them?
My advice is get into school, get your degree, get a 4-year degree, because that is really becoming the standard. Keep your record clean, because things you do when you're in college will stay with you the rest of your career.
Can come back to haunt
Can come
you.
back to haunt you, and we're looking for you, because law enforcement is going to have to bring a lot of new blood into the organizations.
All right.
We want you.
Excellent.
Yes.
Dave Bellows, Dakota County Sheriff, thank you so much for being our guest on Access to Democracy. Thank you for your service protecting the people of Dakota County, and to all of your deputies and everyone who works in your office. And come back and see us again.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.